report like this. Okay. So redirects. And I'm going to talk about in I/O redirection, the standard input usually will come from your keyboard, and the standard output often goes to the screen. Is how it's usually done. There's also standard error, and all of those can be redirected with Linux commands. So we will look at standard input, standard output, and standard error. And when you're running some command that can take input, give output, or do both, the redirection will let you redirect the input and output to any files or folders you want to. And if you get errors or other messages from the operating system, those will go to standard error. And those will also usually just go to screen, but it's possible to split it. So you get the standard error to one place and the standard output to another, for instance. So let's imagine, for instance, that you run something like ls. That usually, of course, throws the output to screen. If you wanted to save to a file instead, you will do what is called output redirection. And you have already seen this. So it is often useful if, for instance, you work with something that gives large output, or if you have a large input, multiple outputs, multiple inputs. And of course, if you want to save the output for later, which very often is the case. And you also can use output from one command as input to another, which we solved with pipes yesterday. But as I mentioned then, it was also possible to instead save the intermittent result to a file. So there are different types of redirection. You can overwrite, and you can append, and you can merge. And I will look mainly at the two first. So override redirection, that is something you have probably seen. This larger than and less than symbols, that is how to take standard output and standard input. Whenever a new program is run, the kernel also creates a table of file descriptors, and they are pointers to files. And the first three entries, descriptors 0, 1, and 2, are used as standard input, standard output, or standard error. And they are sometimes written this way here. And that is that usually if you would say ls throw output to file, or some other command throw output to file, what you're really doing is one here for the standard standard output goes to file. So this is standard in, standard out, and standard error. But this is just assumed in this case, so you don't actually have to write the 0 or the 1. So let's take some examples, and please make sure you have a terminal open, shell, and let's code along. And there are some files we can play with in the directory again that we got yesterday from the table. So if you go to the exercises directory and go to the subdirectory redirect and link, there are some files in it. It's not important what they do or what they're called. They are just useful for playing with here. So let's first try and see what happens if we take the output of ls and throws it to a file. I just named it my ls output.txt. It doesn't matter, but I'm just doing it for the case here. So let's see, ls output. And then, of course, you now have sent the content to the file my ls output. So let's try and look what's in it. And you can see that these are the files that were in ls. And again, everything is on one line, just like we saw yesterday. And if you instead use cat, for instance, to throw stuff from that you write to a file, then that will also work. So let's try create a file that is called my file text, and that will contain whatever you write. And just write something, it doesn't matter. Writing something that goes to the file. And then in order to finish this, I will hold down Control and then press D. That ends this input. And with ls, you can see there's now a my file, the text. And if you then use cat, in this case, just on the file, you will see what was in it. So this was a situation where cat will put the input you are writing to the file that you are creating. And you can then make as many lines as you want to, and then end it with Control D. So what if you were running some program that both creates errors and output, and you would like to save the errors to some file so you can take a look at it later, or maybe you want to send it to support personnel and say, look at this, what's happening here. Then what you would do is that you would run the program, this command here, and then you remember that 2 is standard error. So you say, I take standard error and then send it to the file that I, in this case, named error.log. And then what you get here will be the errors. And you can try do that with this program because it doesn't exist. So when we do this, program and to error log, then it doesn't say anything on the screen, but inside error log, there is the message from the system that there is no such file or directory. So in this case, you got your errors thrown to error.log. What if you instead run image find.sh? We should check that it is actually executable, and it should be. If it's not, then you can make it executable with change mod +x and then the file. But I believe you were just told that under scripting. So let's instead run that, and let's see what happens if we send the errors to error.log. Let's look in error.log. Now it says it didn't find this directory, and it also didn't find this directory, which is fine. I wanted to see it throw different errors. And here also you saw this was the same file we used before, but there is no longer any trace of this error message here because this is just overwriting redirection. So if you're using that and naming the same file, then you will overwrite what you had before. So how do you avoid this? Well, you could use a different file for your errors, but you could also instead append stuff to it. And that is also something that is often useful, all depending, of course, on what it is you want. But in many cases, you would like to keep the material you already had in the file And if you want to use the same one, you have to append to it instead. So let's try do that. Let's try and append some things to the file myfile.txt. And just to remind us, we have myfile.txt. It has content because we put it there. Well, so now I'm using echo and then some text to append. And then I am append redirecting to my file.txt. So let's look at the content of my file.txt. It still has the line that we put there originally, and it now also appended a new line to it. So this is one way of doing that. And you can use printf as well instead of echo. It doesn't matter, it's just a different command for doing that. So what if you had two files you wanted to stick together? Well, you can use cat to append one file to another. Let's see if we have something that is useful. Yes, I could append error.log to my file text, for instance. So let's say I take my file text and I wanted to append error log to it. So we do that like this. Now we should have that inside my file text as well. So as you can see, you cannot just append new things directly from the keyboard. You can also append one file to another. And what then if you wanted to also see it on the screen? Well, in that case, you would use the same line, but then you would put a 0 in front of it. Like this, because then it's also showing what it is appending on the screen while it is appending it also to the file. So what about standard input? A way to do that is to let the program know what the ending text is. And that is because otherwise it will just continue. And a common way of doing that is to use EOF, end of file, as a delimiter. So let's assume we want to run the command word count, and we want to count words we ourselves are writing to the screen. So we are sending this input to word count until we meet end of file. So now it is ready for some input. Writing some input. That C is going to run on and tell me some info about or something. And then I say EOF, and then it ends and it starts counting. And then word count does as it should. It counts the lines, the words, and the characters. Okay, so that is append redirection. You can also do merge redirection. And there is one main case that is often used. And again, I would like to mainly show that one actually, and that is that maybe you want everything into one file. So if you want both the output that was otherwise thrown to screen and the error that was otherwise sent to screen thrown to the same file, then you would do that by saying I redirect what comes from this command to the file, And then afterwards, I say 2 for the standard error, and then the redirect, and also 1, which is the standard output. So it is syntax is simply the redirect symbol plus an ampersand, sorry. And I can see I have a formatting issue here. But that is something, at least if you are at one of the centers where you use module purge, then it is recommended to do this at the beginning of the module purge and throw it to dev null, because you don't want to see it in your file. But it's not important here. But imagine that you are now running this program here, and then you want both the output and the errors from it to go to mylog.log. And that is how you do this. And let's see, what time do we have? 10:32. Let's take 3 minutes and do as many of these exercises as you have time to do.